Thanks for watching. Today we're taking a look at the Axial SCX6 Trail Honcho. Yes, it actually exists. Who knew? Well, I guess a couple of people on Facebook a few weeks ago, because pictures of this thing were leaked in what has been almost a movie-like heist. One of these disappeared from a harbor, pushing the release date, I guess, ahead a tiny bit, or pulling it ahead a tiny bit. So that's why you already see it, because this thing was not planned yet. Let's go have a closer look at it. I immediately fell in love with the Axial SCX6 the minute it came out. I really am a sucker for big trucks, and this thing just ticks all of the boxes. At times I will glance away just to make sure that I'm pointing at the right stuff in the background. I'm filming this from my phone just because it's almost impossible to capture these big trucks and big cars with my DSLR camera. Despite me having a pretty good sized studio, it is such an incredible, tricky feature to get these things captured on camera. So I hope that this shows you the size of it a tiny bit better and that it does it justice. Over here in the back you see my stock or stock-ish SCX6. So that's the regular Jeep JLU that you're used to. Below that you see the Gladiator that I've built. So I do have a lot of hands-on experience with these chassis, and in that I also found a lot of appreciation for them. I have built a short wheel-based SCX6 as well. That one is in the other part of my workshop. And right now Axial has released this Trail Honcho, and I think it's absolutely awesome. Had a close look at it already. There's a ton of cool details, cool features, and a lot of styling cues, perhaps from some angles that you would not expect. And in that, I do think that it really offers something that most of us were perhaps not expecting. So really cool. This thing suddenly appeared online a couple of weeks ago. Pictures were leaked. One of these disappeared from a harbor, and in an unfortunate sequence of events, some pictures were already showing up on various websites. So that pushed the launch date ahead a tiny bit. So that's why you're already seeing it. That's also why I don't have a manual, for example. And well, like in that, there's some info that's lacking, but it's, I think, also boring info, so you don't need it right now. SCX6 Trail Honcho comes in two colors. Comes in this sand type of a beige color that you see over here on the box, and then it comes in the red. I'm really happy that I got the red one just because I think that it really pops. It has 20 LEDs that are already installed. So you have full working headlights, like search lights or trail lights, whatever you want to call those. Some running lights in the bumper as well. Rear lights or tail lights. So you have trail lights and tail lights. And then apart from that, there's a lot of familiar looking stuff. For example, this Spektrum DX3 radio. We all know that one, of course. Steering servo and all of the other electronics as well, all the way down to the shift servo, because yes, it does still have that awesome 2-speed gearbox. All of that stuff is still the same, and I think the most differences lay indeed in that cage, the body, the interior, and those tires, making it a completely different looking truck. Now, if you have a look at this tinier version of the Honcho, you will see that all of this stuff in this version is still sticker. So for example, the grille, the headlights, the wipers, all of that stuff is like make-believe with a sticker. And in this case, everything is molded. So there's a molded grille, molded headlights, molded wipers. It is all just really cool, and it is exceptionally detailed. Now, at first glance, you look at that Axial SCX6 Trail Honcho and you think, oh, this is just an Axial SCX10 version 2 Trail Honcho, but then blown up. It is actually far more than that. If you have a look at these headlights, for example, there are a lot of styling cues coming from this Axial base camp that they took over. So if you have these two vehicles, blend the styles of those two a tiny bit, blow it up, add a lot more detail and a lot more awesome. That's what kind of makes this SCX6 Trail Honcho. I really love the look of it. I think the first thing that I want to point out is how much better this sits on the chassis than the tiny trail honcho does. I have always felt that this body is a bit undersized for the chassis that it sits on. With the larger version, with this SCX6, they have fixed that. I think this looks right at home on that chassis. The chassis, the wheelbase, is the exact same as you would find it on the Jeep. So, but it's still 501 millimeters from one axle center to the other. So no surprises over there. A lot of stuff just carries straight over. And there are, of course, also a couple of parts on this chassis, like that the Mellow Off-Road front bumper, that are new. Now, this the Mellow front bumper offers two lights that are installed, two amber lights. Then D-links are installed. There's some chrome headlight clusters with 4 LEDs on each side, also already installed. And of course, this grille will give you some room for interpretation. So if you want to replicate a full-sized vehicle, be it a Toyota, a Dodge, or whatever, you can just go ahead and perhaps 3D print your own front grille to make it look like its full-sized counterpart. All of this stuff is all brand new, and I think it looks really great. Of course, with this truck being so much bigger than the SCX10 version 2 Trail Honcho, it does need some more detail in order for it to look good, but I think they really knocked it out of the park. This whole section over here as well below the front window with those wipers and those high beams, it just looks fantastic. If you see the cooling ribs on those, there's just a ton of detail going on. The same goes for the interior. You will see that there's a 4-wheel drive selector on that center console. There's also a gear shifter. There's also some switches for your indicator lights, for example, and your wipers, all attached to that steering column. So yeah, really cool. No driver figure in this case. So in the SCX6 Jeep, you have a driver figure with like a cowboy hat. Not everybody like that. So in this case, you can just choose if you want to ghost ride it, perhaps, or if you want to add some sort of doll type of a figure that you find online and turn it into something completely personalized immediately. The foams feel the exact same as they feel on the SCX6 Jeep. So these could perhaps use a bit of a stiffer foam. Of course, Proline has a really nice Jubal stage foam. There's also a lot of people who run anti-foams. But if you are happy with a bit of a softer and squishier tire setup, this might just be for you. Falken Wildpeak tires are, of course, a really familiar design, seeing that we have seen them on several Axial vehicles in the past. But to see them right now in an SCX6 sized tire size, I think is great. Behind this, of course, the oil-filled aluminum bodied shocks and all that stuff that you're perhaps already familiar with. These molded sliders are also brand new, so this is also an item that has not been seen on an SCX6 before. I do think that it looks good, feels very sturdy, and of course it comes in really handy when you're bashing this thing over the rocks. In the back, there's a ton of interesting stuff going on. First of all, there's a fully functioning spare wheel. Now that, of course, is something that you would not find on the Jeep. There's also a completely reworked cage design. So while it is in some aspects perhaps a bit reminiscent of that smaller Trail Honcho, like for example in this top section, the back of it, where this one is completely open, is reworked. So right now you find a big stinger on the back, turning it into, I think, a lot more of an aggressive looking cage design. This spare tire, you could take that off if you want to lighten it up a tiny bit. Two functioning taillights in that pivoting part of that rear bumper. So this is where it is hooked up. Another cool feature, these sand ladders or recovery boards, whatever you want to call them, these are attached to the place where in the SCX10-2 you would find the fuel cell. So that thing has been modified, and if you pull out two body pins from the sides over here, you can actually open this up and you can bring tools or snacks or whatever you want inside of this space that is, well, originally I think a fuel cell. So that's pretty cool. The only thing that you might want to have some sort of homemade solution for is perhaps you want to bring like a stick or something to keep this body standing up when you're changing your batteries, because there's nothing provided to keep this thing from falling down and chopping your hand off. Now underneath the body you will see all of the wiring, of course, for those LEDs that I mentioned. The interior panel, it is of course possible to take that out. You will see that they've really cleverly bolted this together with some of the molded parts that you will see on the top. Very sturdy inner section to keep that rear cage into position. All of it looks pretty freaking cool. What has disappeared is that rear battery mounting position, just because you don't have room for that with that fuel cell or a snack holder sitting in the back. You do, however, still have two battery positions on the sides, so you can bring plenty of juice to keep this thing up and running. In the back you will see the shifting servo, so it still has that awesome 2-speed gearbox. That gearing is so far apart that it actually makes sense to have a 2-speed. We're in the Axial SCX10 version 3 Jeep JLU. They were super close together, the high and the low gear. In the SCX6 they have solved that, and it truly is a different experience to drive it in high gear than it is to drive it in low gear. All of the wiring, it is pretty tidy, but it could be a tiny bit tidier, and I will most likely add some zip ties of my own just to clean things up a tiny bit. We're going to charge some 3-cell Gens Ace batteries to run this thing. I have heard that through the grapevine, you can run this thing on 4 cells, but I don't recommend it, so I'm not going to do it either. So 3-cell will just have to do for today. We're going to take it down about 700 foot to the fjord. So that loop is going to be about 5 miles. And I'm pretty convinced that this thing will just tackle it like a champ. It has been raining for the past couple of days, so we will meet some slick rock, some pretty gnarly sections, perhaps even some mud. So this is also, sad enough, this is the last time that you will see it looking this good. So have another close look at it, and I'm gonna get my shoes, get a coat, and get out. So far so good, everything works, endpoints are set correctly out of the factory, so that's all not disappointing at all. It does definitely need some stiffer foams, just like all the other SCX6 versions. The last time we went that way with the short wheelbase, so today we're going to go this way. There's a dried up riverbed over here, it's pretty interesting actually. sometimes when it rains, this whole thing over here turns into a little creek. So I was kind of expecting that as well right now, since it had rained for a bit. But so far so good. So this is actually pretty accessible at the moment. I really think that when it comes to these 1/6 scale trail tracks, this is just the beginning of what's possible. We have the Jeep body. I hope Proline will come out with another option, just for the people who do not like Jeeps. We currently now have this Trail Honcho as well, which is a really welcome addition. Let me know in the comment section, perhaps you think that should Axial consider making a 1/6 scale Wraith or a 1/6 scale Capra, for example. Maybe even a 1/6 scale Bomber, that would be cool. Or a 1/6 scale Ford Bronco. Just let me know what you think. I really like the larger footprint of these. It makes them so much more realistic, but also manageable out on these trails. Now, grip-wise, these Falken Wild Peaks, I think they're a bit at the same level as those BF Goodriches. Now let's see if it will hop its way out of here. Actually, I don't think it will. It just looks stupid. Man, so much tire ripple there. Does it even show? Well, eventually, but not in the spot where I started. Here as well, you can just tell that it's kind of tripping over itself. with the lack of a proper foam. Might not show that well on camera, but there's a ton of side hilling going on in this section over here. So we're, well, I guess it's like 35 degrees or something. This is not a place that I frequent a lot in winter, just because at certain areas this becomes one big sheet of ice and it's just super treacherous. Now let's see what it does here. Kind of the same surface, but with a bit more moss and a steeper drop at the end. No problems there. Tiny bit of a clearance issue there with the body. That's also, I will say that's also really the only negative thing that I've found so far. And it's only on full lock if it's completely flexed out, to put it like that. Now, have you ever dropped $1,100 off a cliff? It doesn't even look like a big truck from here. Now, my biggest concern is not really dropping the truck off the cliff, but somebody walking down there, getting the truck in their neck. there you see a couple of stepping stones going alongside of that flag post, and then from there there's a path that goes down all the way to that beach. And I think this truck will do that. Please drive slow. So I guess no second gear over here. So far, this truck, it really has not missed a beat. So all of the upgrades are where they're supposed to be. So those rock sliders, for example, you really cannot live without those. If I did not have those, like you would, for example, not find them on the SCX-10 then this thing would have been stuck a bunch of times already, and most likely I would have also ripped the body. The tires and the foams, they're not fantastic, but you know, they do work. Same with the steering servo, it's browning out a tiny bit in some places, but there is always something left to be desired, so keep that in mind. Really easy to drive trucks, these, so it immediately gives you the confidence to go and tackle some more difficult terrain where perhaps with another truck you would be a bit hesitant to go out and immediately try it. But these SCX-6s, they're incredibly predictable in how they behave. Also, if I thought for a minute that this thing would break down at any point, I would not chance going this far from home, but I'm 100% sure that this thing will hold up. Now watch me break an axle. No, just kidding. And you can tell it is rough out here. There's no chance to do this with a 10 scale. I guess that's in a way that's one of the least highlighted features of a truck like this. People go like, oh yeah, you know, it's big and big is cool. True, but the amount of possibilities that it opens for you to tackle some terrain that otherwise you would never in a million years go attempt to tackle at all. Because all of this stuff, you can tell it's so incredibly rough. This is really not 10 scale country, and for a 6 scale it is absolutely perfect. All the way from the steps that we saw over at the top to these rough boulders. Yeah, it's just fantastic to drive a truck like this. Despite it having that cage and that stinger and even the spare wheel, it does not feel top heavy at all. Now also keep in mind, it did not load up that fuel cell with like 200 grams of peanuts, but that will of course also sort of affect your center of gravity. But yeah, it's awesome. Definitely feels not heavier than the Jeep does. I also hope that during the past couple of months you've seen what's possible if you just get creative with some of the existing models. I have of course turned the regular Jeep into a Gladiator. I've also turned it into a two-door by shortening the wheelbase. I'm convinced that with this Trail Honcho you can get creative as well and adapt a few different looks to it. Perhaps even adapt a Jeep cab and marry that to that Honcho rear cage with the stinger. I hope the camera picks this up, but it's such a long way up over here. So we're talking, it's about 700 foot of cliffs to get to where I live. I think this is a good spot and a good opportunity to button up this video. There will be a lot more SCX6 content coming up. Not just the Trail Honcho, but also the short wheelbase Jeep, the Gladiator you will see again. I have some stuff that I need to add to the Gladiator too. So all of that stuff is in the making and up and coming. This truck, it just seems to be getting smaller the more you run it. So it seems to be really obnoxiously big at first. And then the more you run it, the more that disappears to the background. So really completely different experience from driving a 110 scale. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section. I will try to get back to you. If you wonder where to get one, there's a link in the video description. If you have not subscribed yet, please do, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Test. Back on.